Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Matt. I thought that I would film a little TBR. I haven't actually done a TBR before, so here goes nothing, I guess. Actually, it's kind of a big TBR. I'm probably not going to read all of these books, but this is just a list of prospective reads, and we'll see which ones I get to and which ones I don't. So, first up, I'm going to start with the section of books that I've already started. And first up, First up, we have Rosewater by Taddy Thompson, I believe. This is a book that's set in Nigeria in 2066, and it is about this city. How do I explain this book? There is this kind of city that's clustered around this gigantic kind of alien dome, and this dome seems to grant miracles on certain occasions. So it attracts like a whole bunch of pilgrims, essentially, who come seeking some kind of help. And so the dome has like cured people of different terminal diseases. But something that it also does is it will reanimate dead people sometimes, but they don't come back quite right, and they often have to be put down. The book follows a man named Karu, and he is a sensitive. He is able to access something called the Xenosphere, and with that, he has certain mental powers. So he's able to invade other people's minds and make them like see and feel what he wants. And he can also get information, and he's able to find things, which means that he'll often find lost relatives, lost jewelry, lost pets, all for a price. And he's recruited to work in this secret section of the Nigerian government called Section 45, I think. Um, and that's all I can really tell you about it. But so far, it's pretty enjoyable. I think I'm about halfway through, and I'm liking it so far. Next, we have Devil's Night Dawning. This is a book that Caitlin over at Kitty G really, really loved. It was part of the SPFBO, which is Mark Lawrence's competition, the self-published fantasy blog off. You should check it out. And Caitlin was a judge for that and had to read like a whole bunch of books. I think she had to read like 30 books and choose one. I know that Caitlin really, really loved it, and she was talking about rereading it recently, and so I thought that I would give it a second try. This time, I'd say about 40% into it, and I'm enjoying it a lot more than the first time. Next up, we have Sin Eater. This is the sequel to the book The Aching God, and I mentioned this in one of my previous videos. Um, but The Aching God is kind of like a dungeon crawler type fantasy where there is this order in the world called the Soraic League. And they go into all of these caves and ruins and dungeons to search for different treasures and whatnot, but it's incredibly dangerous and people are constantly dying. A plague breaks out in the first book, and Auric has to go on a little expedition to return this kind of crystal that was brought to the Citadel and seems to possibly be the cause of this illness. After that, we have The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. This is the sequel to a really great book from last year, The Ruin of Kings. And Ruin of Kings was told in a very kind of like scattered way, I guess you could say. It's told by a prisoner and his jailer kind of going back and forth, and there's like a whole bunch of interjections and whatnot. So it made for a very interesting narrative. And that's something that I liked about the first book. And I also like that you just kind of get thrown into the middle of things, which is a feature of Malazan that I love. But I'm into book two, and I'm mad. I'm mad about it, and let me tell you why. The reason I'm mad is because book one essentially ended on a really big cliffhanger. Some crazy shit happened, and book two starts 3 days after those events. Our main character Kieran is traveling away from the city after all of these different hell marches of demons have broken out all over the empire. Kieran is traveling after all of these hell marches have broken out all over the empire. And while traveling through this town, he meets a woman named Janelle who's traveling with an old woman and a priest. And they meet in a tavern. And then a storm rolls in, and they're trapped in the tavern. And that, my friends, is where the entire book takes place. Seriously. While they're trapped in the tavern, Kieran listens to Janelle and the priest tell the story of what they've been doing up until this point. And so I thought that this would last for like the first section of the book. Janelle also tells Kieran that he has to fight a dragon, essentially. And so I thought that what would happen is Janelle would be telling him her story during kind of the first section of the book, because there are 5 different sections. And then after section 1, they would leave the tavern and go on their quest to fight the dragon or whatever. But no, I'm halfway through the book and they're still in the tavern with Janelle telling her story. And I skipped to the very end and they are still in the tavern. So all of book 2 takes place in one day, where Janelle is telling the story of what she's been doing for the last couple months. But does it actually further the plot of book 1 whatsoever? No, we are just getting a whole bunch of exposition. And I'm just kind of annoyed because I was really looking forward to book 2, and I honestly think that you might just DNF it and just read book 3 when it comes out, because I feel like this isn't information that I particularly need. So I'm thinking I might just DNF it and skip to the 3rd book when that comes out. We'll see. I'm not loving it. Then we have 2 books, The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams and The Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich. The Ninth Reign I've talked about in another video, so check that out if you're curious. And Rivers of London takes place in a London where a cop finds out that there's actually this whole supernatural world that he hasn't been aware of. And he gets taken on to be the apprentice of this maid she works with in the police force. Now moving on to new books, because November had a bunch of new releases come out on the 5th that I'm super stoked for. First we have The Toll by Neil Shusterman. The Toll is the final book in the Arc of the Scythe trilogy. This takes place in a world far in the future where humans have conquered death. If you die, you are just brought to the hospital and you can be revived. The only way to permanently kill someone is to destroy their body with fire or acid, or let them get eaten by sharks. We've conquered death and aging to the point that whenever people feel like it, you can just reset your age back to 21, I think is the minimum. And in this world, teenagers who are like rebelling against their parents will also do something called splatting, where they'll like jump in front of a car or they'll jump off of a building in order to kill themselves as kind of just like a fun pastime, as you do. In this world, there's something called the Thunderhead, which is a computer that controls every aspect of civilization. However, there's one entity that is separate from the Thunderhead, and those are the Scythes. The Scythes are people who are ordained to essentially be Grim Reapers. They go around killing people and keeping the world's population in check. There are kind of 2 camps of Scythes. There are ones who don't want to be the Scythes and do their job reluctantly, and there are others who want to be Scythes and are kind of abusing their power and treating people really awfully and being super cruel, massacring like a whole airplane. Book 2 ended on a massive cliffhanger, so I'm super stoked to get into book 3. I just downloaded it last night, and yeah, it's going to be good. Then we have The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Erin Morgenstern is the author that wrote The Night Circus back in the day, and I read that book and really disliked it. However, when I heard Sam from Thoughts on Tomes talking about The Starless Sea, I got pretty excited about it because it sounds like a super cool book to me. It's a little bit hard to explain because they're like stories within stories, but essentially it's about this guy named Zachary who's in grad school and he is working on a degree called Emergent Technologies, and he works a lot within video games essentially. The book starts when Zachary goes to the library and he finds this book, and he reads a story about this kid who, when he was younger, he found a door painted onto a wall, and the door seemed incredibly real, and he was going to open it but chose not to. And the reason that this is a issue for Zachary is because he was that kid. So he basically just found a book where a story from when he was 12 is like written in this book. That's kind of all I really know about it so far. But yes, there are a whole bunch of chapters that are just kind of like little vignettes of different stories that go on. I think it's going to be good. Then we have an arc that I got that I was super excited about. The arc is for A Conjuring of Assassins by Kate Glass, the first book being An Illusion of Thieves. I really, really enjoyed Illusion of Thieves. It is about this woman named Cataline, and she was sold by her family when she was like 10 years old to a uh, she was sold to something called the Moon House, and the Moon House trains courtesans. Cataline became the personal courtesan to the kind of like duke, the ruler of the city state, I guess, and his name is Sanjo, also known as Il Padrone, and she's been living with him for the last 9 years. Something happens in the beginning of the book, and she is dismissed from his service, and she has to go back to living in the beggar's ring of the city while her dad gets his hand chopped off and her entire family is exiled from the city. She goes back to using her former name, which is Rami. She and her one remaining brother weren't exiled from the city and, in fact, have to stay there because it seems like Mary has magic. In this world, magic is seen as evil, and anyone possessing magic has to be wrapped in chains and thrown into the sea. Else they wake the dragon, Dragonus, that sleeps under the Costa Drago and will destroy the world if he awakens, is kind of the story, or the myth. Neri has the ability to find things, essentially. So if he knows what he's looking for, he is able to use his magic to find a path to it, no matter what it is. It actually works to the point that he can walk through walls at some points, if that's the only way to get to something. Rami, on the other hand, has the ability to, if she's touching a person, she can overwrite a story in their mind, essentially. So if someone saw something they shouldn't have, she can touch them and replace that memory with something else. It turns out that she can actually do this to herself in a way. She can basically tell herself a story and basically be an actor and become that person, but she becomes that person so completely that she doesn't remember her own identity unless someone with her touches her skin and calls her name, her real name, Rami, and then she comes back to herself. And this is super terrifying for her because if she tells herself that she is a prostitute for some reason and there's no one around to help her, she'll live as a prostitute for the rest of her life. She will be convinced that she's a prostitute. She'll have forgotten who she really is, and that will be her life from now on. So there are drawbacks to her power. This Illusion of Thieves was a really great book, and I would definitely recommend it. A Conjuring of Assassins is really good so far, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm about 1/3 into it. I read way too many books at the same time. And it's not even that I'm like reading all of them and alternating between them. It's that I get distracted by a new book and neglect the ones that I've started. And so I'm like constantly rotating through books. Anyway, then we have 2 foreign books. I am trying to just like keep up with my language skills, so I'm going to be reading Vassal Lord, which is a manga that is in Japanese. Then I'm also going to be reading Le Fiancé de l'Hiver, which is known in English as A Winter's Promise. It's that book with the blue cover, and it's kind of like the spiraling castle thing on the cover. I'll insert a picture. Then I have a couple books for the One Readathon to Rule Them All, which is taking place from November 22nd through the 30th. I am one of the co-hosts. The lovely Ashley over at Don't Have a Degree in Reading has created this, and she really outdid herself with the Harry Potter theme this year. But for House Ravenclaw, there are 4 prompts here, and the first one is to read the first book in a fantasy series. For that, I've chosen A Legacy of Ash. I was just looking at all the new releases when I was trying to buy The Toll and the Starless Sea and all the other books that came out on the 5th. And Legacy of Ash, which I'd never heard of before, was one of them. And I read the description and thought it might be worth reading. One of the other prompts is to read a book with comic relief. For that, I'm going to read Fate of the Fallen by Kel Cade. Kel Cade has written the King's Dark Titan series, which is a series I really love. It's super accessible for people who are new to fantasy or for younger readers. Fate of the Fallen, however, isn't in this series, but I'm expecting there to still be some of Kel Cade's kind of like signature comic relief. The next prompt is to read a book with a complex magic system, and for that I'm going to be reading The Sixth Strand by Melissa McPhail, which is the 5th book in a pattern of light and shadow. A Pattern of Light and Shadow is one of the three books that I recommended for Wheel of Time fans in a video that you might not have seen yet. I don't know if I've edited it or posted it yet. I don't know. But basically, the first book is Sephiroth's Hand. You can find a review of it on Caitlin's channel, which is Kitty G. It's a really kind of fun, interesting book. It's really light in tone. And again, it's pretty accessible for kind of younger readers. Something great about the series is that with each book, it just keeps expanding the world. So in book one, we have a couple countries. From there, we go to the entire world. From there, we go to multiple worlds. And then we go into the realms of shadow. And so it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And we're learning more and more about how everything works and all the different races and all the magic and whatnot. The last prompt is to read a book by an author from a marginalized community. And for that, I am choosing The Deep by River Solomon. The Deep is really exciting for me, actually, because I just love when art inspires more art. So a couple of years ago, the band named Clipping, which is led by David Diggs, actually got nominated for a Hugo Award for their song called The Deep. And The Deep starts with,
our mothers were pregnant African women thrown overboard while crossing the Atlantic Ocean on slave ships. We were born breathing water as we did in the womb. We built our home on the seafloor, unaware of the two-legged surface dwellers, until their world came to destroy ours. With cannons, they searched for oil beneath our cities. Their greed and recklessness forced our uprising. Tonight, we remember.
and the song kind of details this whole story of what happens to the people who were born under the water and how they rise up kind of in rebellion to the two-legged surface dwellers that are ruining their oceans. What's really cool about this is that Clipping actually took an electronic duo called Drexia, but the band Drexia had this whole discography that kind of talked about this whole underwater society that they had thought of. And so David Diggs took that, ran with that idea, and created the song The Deep. And then the author River Solomon ran with the song The Deep and wrote a little book about it. And so what's really cool about that is that Clipping actually made a whole album that's based on the book that River Solomon wrote, that is based on the song The Deep by Clipping, that is based on the entire discography of the band Drexia. So I just really love to see art inspiring more art. Anyway, those are all the books that I might be reading this month. There are 16 of them, so we'll see which ones I actually get to. But yeah, tell me what you're going to be reading down below, and let me know what books you're actually picking up for the One Readathon to Rule Them All if you're participating. And let me know if you're picking up the Slytherin book I recommended, Cage of Souls. It's such a good book. It's in my best SFF standalones video. Go check it out. Anyway, that's all. Have a good one. Bye.